They are the restaurants that we cherish and hold a special place in our hearts, where warm and welcoming staff greet us with a smile and make us feel like cherished guests. These are the establishments that whisk us away on a culinary adventure, and no detail is overlooked in offering extraordinary dining experiences. It is where we choose to toast our achievements and celebrate milestones with our loved ones. They are the distinguished restaurants of North America, and every DiRōNA has a story. Renowned chef Bert Cutino, a name synonymous with excellence in the hospitality industry. Born in the coastal city of Carmel, California, Chef Cutino's saga began at the Monterey Peninsula College while working full-time in the restaurant industry. From serving in the U.S. Naval Reserves to receiving an honorary degree from Johnson & Wales, he has left an indelible mark. In 1968, he, alongside his partner Ted Balistreri, opened the Sardine Factory restaurant in historic Cannery Row, a culinary haven that would go on to receive the most prestigious restaurant accolades. Welcome to another episode of Every DiRōNA Has a Story. I'm excited today. With me, not only DiRōNA Hall of Fame member, co-founder of the Sardine Factory, Monterey, California, Chef Bert Cutino joins me. Bert, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure and honor to be with you today and discuss where we have to discuss concerning history or Monterey or whatever. And the restaurant, of course, is our love. Ted and I, that's our big love, is still the Sardine Factory after 55 years.
Wow, 55 years. So where did it all begin? I know you were born there in Carmel, school in Monterey, and you ended up with the most renowned restaurant possible in Monterey. Tell me about the early times and when you had the idea for the restaurant.
Well, it kind of goes back to the time when I was about 13 years old, actually. My brother had a job as a lifeguard at a homeless guest ranch down in Carmel Valley, which is about 30 miles from here. And anyway, they needed a dishwasher, and my brother, being the lifeguard there, being a big hero, says to them, "I can get you a dishwasher." Well, it's hard getting staff at that time. I was 13, and he says, "God, you can make 30 cents an hour." I says, "Geez, 30 cents an hour, I'll jump at it." He says, "You got a chance to come to the pool. You got a chance to ride horses." Oh, this sounded like a hell of a vacation in reality, but it never came to never came to that. I ended up washing dishes by hand 3 meals a day. I didn't see daylight much, I'll be honest with you. But you know something? I didn't let that bother me at all because my goal was to really get somewhere in my life. I had told myself a long time ago I wanted to be in business, but I didn't know what. It seems like this became the vehicle in reality for that. And ended up, I started cooking, and then I got an opportunity to do you do an externship type thing, but you work in a restaurant and you go through a process where they train you and you actually graduate for certification as a cook. And I did do that while I was working as a busboy in front of the house and learning to cook in the back of the house. Fortunately, it was a great chef that I trained under. He was very knowledgeable, very talented. He showed me how to do ice carving, told me all about how aging meat. He told me just about everything you could think of. So he took me under his wing. So when I first started with him, he said, "You got to start the morning off right." And I said, "What's that, chef? We'll have a cup of coffee." I said, "Okay." He poured a shot of brandy in it. I think I was high for the whole week. But anyway, he knew I wasn't afraid to work and I wanted to learn. My biggest goal was to learn. And I really got excited about cooking. I really, my mother actually was my inspiration as a young boy, where I was 5 years old and I'd be cooking with her, and she'd have 30 people in the house in the basement, big long table, Sicilian style. And that ended up being a heck of a place where we had a gathering of family and friends. And my mother, being the chef that she was, and I didn't know the difference between a restaurant and my house because they did the same thing. And so it was really an interesting thing. So going through the process of cooking and working in the restaurant and going to school, actually, I got an opportunity to work the front of the house as a maitre d'. And the owner kind of liked me, and he thought I'd be great doing that part time. because they need relief. Open days is 7 days a week, a restaurant on the wharf in Monterey at that time. It's called Neptune's Table. It became a famous place where Bing Crosby had his headquarters there. But anyway, I started working within that situation. And next thing you know, they promoted me to assistant manager. Now, I'm 19 years old. I don't even have, I mean, I can't even tend bar in reality, but they threw me behind the bar anyway. So I learned the bar, right? And the next thing I know, the manager was an elderly man, and he said to me, he says, you know, kid, his name was George. He says, Bert, he says, you could take my place right now. I said, no, George. I said, I don't know everything about it. You know a lot. He says, you've been studying it. I know you have. I said, yes, I have. I've been studying business management. I'm going to school for that after high school. And he says, why don't you be the manager and I be the assistant manager? I said, you're kidding. Well, actually what happened, the boss liked the idea and I became the manager running a full-scale restaurant at 19. And I still don't think I knew it all. And I didn't, okay? But I knew a lot and I kept studying. I think that was the key to success, was learning, continuing learning. And I still kept myself up in the kitchen as far as the food went. And then along, everything was going good until the military service came, because as far as college was concerned, sometimes it's hard to do both. So I know I had to give up something, but I didn't want to give up the restaurant. So I gave up the college. It's already been a year. And then I was going in the Army. But at this time at the restaurant on Sundays at time, the Naval Reserve would come in and I take care of the admiral and the captain that would come in, because they wanted a window table because it was all view, this restaurant. And this time I told him I wouldn't be doing that anymore. And he says, why? I said, I'm going in the Army. He says, raise your right hand. He swore me in at the table in the Navy Reserve. It's kind of crazy, I thought. But I didn't take it serious at first, but they were serious. Next thing I know, I'm in the Navy Reserve. And the only thing I thought about reserve, that means I'm not going anywhere. But in reality, I needed to go 2 years active duty. So I ended up going down to San Diego, active duty there. And then, you put in for what you want to do. And I had some good marks in scores in, let's just say math was one of my high subjects. Numbers, it's just these are number guys, no. But anyway, I ended up getting a high score there. And next minute I know, they put me into HN. I says, what's HN? Hospitalman. They made me a hospital corpsman. I went to 12 weeks of hospital training. What they call is a bedpan commando, that type of thing. I was a little shocked. I got to tell you the truth. I was a little shocked about that, because I says, I like cooking, pots, pans, fine, no problem. But going back there with needles and all the other aspects that relate to that. But I really got a high score on the graduation of that. I really got into it. I tell you the truth. I thought maybe I was Dr. Goodare or something. But I went through that. I was stationed in Alameda, California. I didn't go too far from Monterey. It was like only 2.5 hours away. And I put in for Europe and Japan. I figured I might as well travel on the government. Next thing you know, I'm in Alameda, California, which is next to San Francisco. So they ended up putting me driving an ambulance, because I had California driver's license. It made it a lot easier for them in that sense. And then while I was off, I went to work at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. I went to work in the garde manger work. Now, I didn't know the swigs from Adam in those days. And of course, I got a job there part-time doing garde manger work, every food and everything else. And I remember Mr. Swig came in and he saw me and he asked the chef who I was. And the chef says, some little Italian boy in the Navy. He says, in the Navy, I was in the Navy. So he came over and saw me and he says, you like what you're doing? I says, yes, sir. He says, good. He says, I'm a Navy man. So what do you do in the Navy? I says, I'm a hospital corpsman. Corpsman, Doc. He started calling me Doc. So the cooks start calling me Doc. All of a sudden I'm getting that nickname. But anyway, that was a good experience. I learned a lot there. Great chef there, by the way. And then I got to work at other places in the city during the time I was up there. And then I inevitably got back to Monterey, because they stationed me in Monterey. And I was back to my hometown, which my mother could not believe. What kind of a Navy are you in? And all of a sudden you're back. I says, Mom, that's the way it works in the Navy. So I went back to work in the restaurant business. So why not? That's what I wanted to do. That was my future. So in college, I had met this young man from New York who talked a little funny. We sat in the back room of economics class, and I asked him, "Where you're from?" He says, "Flatbush." I says, "What country is that in?" He actually got mad at me, and that was Ted Ballesteri. And Ted and I linked up because we both had the same goals, the same ideas. We both wanted to be in the restaurant business. He worked as a busboy. I done that, washed dishes, whatever. And we hope someday we're gonna do that. Unfortunately, the teacher didn't agree with us. He said, "You guys are talking too much." He brought us in the front of the room. He says, "You see these two gentlemen? They never amount to nothing because they don't listen." Well, anyway, we kind of changed that thing to him. So he was pleasantly surprised. Of course, he was honored that we got through it and we did make a success of it. So I had bought a house when I was 19 in Carmel, California, and then paid very little money for it, and it was called the Wishing Well. Even had a name, dilapidated place, but I rented it and I split it into two apartments, and then the house next door came up. And at that time, I'd been in communication with Ted. He was working with his uncles down in, they were in Phoenix and all that area down there, the produce people. His uncles were brokers. So anyway, we ended up getting together, and eventually he ended up working for the company I was working for when I went back from the Navy. And he went to the Marco Polo in Visalia. And that's where we met a couple of our future partners, Armenian guys, George and Harry, just terrific guys. They're gone now, but they were the wonderful guys you ever could have partners with. And then after that, we talked about opening the Sardine Factory, which we did. They didn't want to invest with us because they thought the name was crazy. We only thought what we thought was good for the area because my family was in the commercial fishing business, his family in the produce business, and nobody really idolized what the area was except Steinbeck, John Steinbeck, of course, Cannery Row, the famous book. And I actually met John Steinbeck when I went fishing with my father at 13 for a while, and I didn't know who he was. I asked my father, "Who was that man?" He came on the boat and said hello. He says, "It's some drunken writer your uncle knows, never amount to nothing." I found out later it was John Steinbeck. But anyway, the canneries went busted. And in 1953, like I said, when I went there and started working there after I did the summer at the ranch washing dishes, I knew I didn't want to be a fisherman, even though I loved the idea. I enjoyed what it was. It was a great experience as a young man, without going with a hook and line and just lay out a net and get 10 ton of fish. But the sardines had disappeared. 16 canneries had collapsed, affected my father, affected my uncles and cousins. That was the industry that really was in Monterey itself. So Ted and I always could think of opening a restaurant. And then we thought about Cannery Row would be a great spot. First of all, because it'd probably be cheap with everything dilapidated down there. And of course, we always like to own the property. So Ted and I, became actually partners in property before we opened the restaurant. And I brought him into the house next door. So we found a doctor by the name of Dr. Caselli, and he put in 20,000. We put up the houses, and we decided to go in business. And we found this spot up the hill. It was an old canteen to feed the sardine workers, and it was dilapidated building. It had been a dance studio, a gym, had a stage in it, and it had no kitchen. Believe me, it had no kitchen. And it had about 60 seats we could probably put in there, and the bar more, of course. And all we could think of was get this place going and open it up. He left his job, I left my job, and that's what we started to do. And then we told people, the Sardine Factory came up with that name because we had pictures of the sardine industry in the bar. And that was the ambiance of the restaurant and the logo that we developed, that was developed for us. So,
Right.
so go ahead.
Fine dining in the beginning, or what? What was the menu back in 1968?
No, 68, I'll tell you the truth, there wasn't too much fine dining around here. I mean, there was Pebble Beach, of course, and there was a place called Neil Devon's on Cannery Row, sort of an odyssey in the midst of all those canneries. And we wanted a fine dining restaurant. That was our goal. And we want to be unique, and that's why we call it the Sardine Factory. Fortunately, I bought some extra equipment for the kitchen that we end up adding on to the restaurant. And because we needed it, it was very small. I had to rent a a refrigerated truck for refrigeration. That's how bad it was for $50 a month. But we opened up the restaurant and it was a great success immediately because we were doing regional food, which is now very important, farm to table, which is now very knowledgeable. We've been doing it since 1968. The artichokes and all the local fish here and abalone. We created an abalone bisque, which became famous. We served it at 1984, Ronald Reagan's inaugural in Washington, D.C. And we also did in 81, but we brought the local prawn there that time. I wasn't too sure about bringing the soup, but we made that work. And that's another story in itself. But it became very successful. I remember Frank Sinatra sent somebody over to get our soup. We had 50 restaurants. It's called Taste of America. It was a very successful event. And they were all volunteers. You know, we paid for everything. We brought the seafood. We brought whatever we want to bring. And the White House chef was a friend of mine named Haller. Chef Haller, I called him up when I was there. I says, Haller, how you doing? He says, Chef Cutino, what are you doing in Washington, D.C.? So I explained what we're doing. He says, oh, let me come down and see you. So he came down to a booth and he was dressed up with the chef hat and his uniform. And he got behind my table there and started dishing up the soup, for example. And he says, Chef, this soup's pretty good. I says, well, thank you. Well, the people next to me to the left and the ones to the right, they want to know who was this elderly gentleman in a chef uniform. Who was he? I told him he's the White House chef. He says, tell us another story. Nobody believed me. But
now, the restaurant, you started 60 seats, and now you're, I mean, it's...
Well, we had 60 to 70 seats when you figure the bar. And, you know, I got to tell you one story about the bar, if I may. We were looking for a bar to fit in this place because it didn't have a bar. And we heard about, through someone, we heard about that there's a bar, a sight unseen that you can bid on from a warehouse. Like, was wanting to get rid of it. It's been stored there for years. So we went over there and somebody bid $100 and we bid 160. We ended up with this beautiful Brunswick bar, the front and the back. And believe it or not, it fit perfect in our bar. Fit perfect from side to side. It was meant to be there. And it actually was a bar off a ship, a commercial ship. Oh, so from there on, you know, we started to go and then we began expanding the restaurant because things got real well. We, of course, wanted to expand on the restaurant. We wanted to open up another place. And the doctor didn't really want to make that kind of move. He thought, you guys go ahead, you know, so we bought him out. And then we opened a place called the Butcher Shop in Carmel, which was a steakhouse. And that was a great place. We had a real good thing going with that operation. And so now we had 2 restaurants. And then we had the restaurant, a former restaurant owned by Mr. Bodine called the Jolly Roger. We had bought that one as well. Here we now got 3 restaurants. And of course, there was opportunity to expand the Sardine Factory. And that's where we added a room. We added the captain's room, which is a very sort of turn of the century look. It has some artifacts from the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. And that became a beautiful room. It has a tin ceiling from an old hotel and a chandelier, but elegantly styled. We wanted something really nice. And then my partner was talking to me again as he talks to me about expanding. He says, what do you think about adding another room? And I says, well, you know, if I got another room, I'm going to add more of the kitchen. The kitchen's still kind of small. So he says, whatever you got to do. So we had this guy who actually designed the place. He worked for 20th Century Fox named Roy Amy Hamlin. And Roy, all he did was paint a picture. And we just followed the picture. We didn't have an architect or anybody else. So what he painted is what you got. So he put this glass dome conservatory room as an addition. Wow, that was a challenge to get that kind of a thing in there. But we did. We were able to accomplish that. And that sat 100 people with Botticelli statue in the center. And that really, you know, that really added more to the restaurant that we needed. Of course, the expansion of the kitchen. And then we put the wine cellar room downstairs. Now, the wine cellar room downstairs, we had all the wine down there. We put a long table for 28 people, a redwood tree that fell in Big Sur that was carved. We had our wine captain actually did all this work. He was amazing. Don't ask me how much it cost. I still don't know. But anyway, we did some real fancy dinners down there, politicians, celebrities, Clint Eastwood, I can name them all. Jim Nance, CBS Sports, always brought celebrity people down there. Governors, mayors, we had them all down there. And believe it or not, everybody that had a fundraiser down there has always won. Nobody has lost yet. They call it the lucky room. So
Tell me,
it,
tell me about the wine collection down,
oh, well,
and we've been down there for a DiRōNA event.
well,
How
you
did the
know,
wine grow to such a, I mean, there's only a few restaurants in the United States that could even rival your collection. How did that
well,
come to be?
well, you know what happened? My partner, of course, I got to give him a lot of credit on the wine. You know, I was really in the kitchen doing all that stuff, and he was really handling a lot of the parts of the restaurant. And the wine thing became, we had a young man come to work for us by the name of Fred Dame. Fred Dame was about, what, 18, 19 years old, I guess. And he was interested in wine and eventually became very interested in wine and started to study wine. In the meantime, my partner and I, we love wine and we started buying a lot of wine and we kept buying wine and buying wine. We needed a big place. You know, we got over 2,000 wines right now on our list that we sell, plus what we got back up. And we got about 40,000 cases stashed all over the place. And really, we got probably more than we need, but we love wine. We promote wine. We started a lot. In fact, I give my partner credit with this with the wine list. You know, the Europeans guys come in to make your wine list. They want to make it their way. We want to make it our way. And we did. And now a lot of restaurants do the same thing, which is interesting. But Fred Dame, of course, as you know, became a certified master sommelier. I enjoyed working with him when I was doing the wine cellar downstairs and I was in the kitchen cooking and he was working the front end of that and putting that all together and putting some great wines together with some great food that I had to create. It was really a great experience for a long, long time until Fred, I'll tell you one incident with Fred because I'll never forget it. I had worked 3 days on this party doing this high-end party downstairs. And of course, Fred always wore a tuxedo thing down there, you know, his white glove and still is today. And after we did all that, it was about 10:30 at night. I hadn't eaten. I was hungry. And I asked the kitchen crew, got anything back there? We got some spaghetti. I said, oh, give me some spaghetti. I says, by the way, where's Fred Dame? He's in the dining room. So I go in the dining room. I'm looking for Fred Dame. And all of a sudden I see him sitting there. He's got a candelabra in front of him, a decanted wine, and he's drinking a rack of lamb. And I walked up to him. I says, Fred, I think there's something wrong here. He says, what's that, boss? I says, I'm eating spaghetti, eating lamb. He says, yeah, what's the matter with that? I said, Fred, I'm supposed to be eating the lamb and you're supposed to be eating the spaghetti. He says, I don't know, boss, but I thought this would be okay. You son of a gun. But we love Freddie. We love Freddie. Freddie was, you know, he had that photographic brain and he was brilliant and he was brilliant and became very successful. We had the first master sommelier in 1986 done in our restaurant, the testing that was done there. And eventually, you know, I got through my certification to CMC, Certified Master Chef, and he became on my board with the National Chefs Organization, the American Culinary Federation, Academy of Chefs Honor Society. And he threw me and Ted on his board of the Master Sommeliers. Well, being on his board became more dangerous. You know why? Because we go to their meetings and stuff, we're drinking wine like crazy. I get home, my wife says, where the heck you been? You look kind of tired. I says, well, I've been drinking a little wine for the last 2 days. I says, Freddie's killing me.
Now, you
But
mentioned the importance of continuing education, and I
yeah,
know how dear to your heart scholarships and culinary schools. Tell us a little bit about the Bert Cutino Scholarship and your involvement in some of the community colleges there in Monterey, I believe.
yes. Well, Monterey College is what I graduated from. Ted went on to hotel school in Washington State. And, you know, I wanted to start a culinary program there because right now, you know, hospitality was our biggest thing here next to agriculture. And couldn't seem to put it together with them. Not that we couldn't put it together because we could. But the school, you know, they had other priorities, they had the reasons, they worried about the money and all that other stuff. And that was something I wanted to see happen. Now, in the interim, I, of course, was a member of the local chef association, American Culinary Federation chapter in Monterey, and became president of that. And then eventually I went up to national and became vice president of national level and took over the Academy of Chef Honor Society because it needed to be run up better than what it was. And I took it over and it became very successful. And one of the things I pushed was that we have to give back to the students who are going to follow in our profession. And I think a lot of the chefs, when they retire, they end up on a couch when they could be in a school, help teaching young people. And Ted and I are firm believers in that. And giving back to education is a key. Well, I became chef of the year locally, and of course that's a big thing. They give you a medal and all that stuff for what you do. And then as I moved on the national level, then I became a national chef of the year, and that's on a national basis. And I said, my God, how many chefs of the year are going to be? And all of a sudden, just recently, a couple of years ago, all of a sudden they want me to be the chef of the year again in Monterey. And I says, why do you want me? You already had me. And he says, no, we want you to be chef of the year again. I says, well, he said, Bert, you've done so much, blah, blah, blah. I said, whatever. Okay. So we have it. About 450 people show up for this dinner. And they had a scholarship at my name that they put. And we raised about $90,000 on that scholarship. And that scholarship is there to help young people to further their careers in the culinary field or the hospitality field. It doesn't make any difference. It's a matter if they want to go into hotels, working in hotels, working in restaurants, at the front of the house, back of the house, whatever. And the scholarship is based for giving them more education on a different level, higher level. And that's what's happening with that. And I'm very proud of that fact. And with that, of course, we opened up a culinary school not too long ago called the Branch of Cielo. Retired Judge Phillips, he contacted me and he said he wanted me to be involved. And I says, what do you open? He says, a culinary school. I says, Judge, culinary school for kids that are going to jail, to divert them from going to jail, to help give them an opportunity in life. And I says, well, I like that idea. I said, but Judge, you got to get the property. He says, I got the property. It was the old boys ranch, 100 acres, and they gave it to him for 100 years, $1 a year. I said, you better send a check now. So we helped put that together, and we got students going. It's been very successful all through the years, graduating students. And I do a big fundraiser every year to support that as well, to keep that going. We're very proud of that one. And fortunately, they're now going to open a big culinary school. The college is finally going to open in Marina here, about 600 students. And I'm involved with that one too, as you know.
So talking about awards for a second.
Yes.
Sardine Factory, it must have been a travel holiday award winner prior to 1990 and prior to DiRōNA. That must have been something the restaurant received at one point. Am I right?
Yeah, in the 70s. That was about 72. We received the Travel Holiday Award. We were just fascinated by getting that award because it was so prestigious. We have received a lot of other awards, but the Travel Holiday Award was certainly great. And I got to tell you, really, when went through all that process with that award over the years, and was great receiving that because you don't just apply for it. You got to have somebody come and check you out to make sure you're worthy of that award, and that's the way it should be. And then eventually, it of course changed hands in the ownership, and then eventually became Distinguished Restaurant North America. I got to tell you, I give my partner a lot of credit that he got involved with that, and they finally got that going and established DiRōNA. I was fortunately one time to be the chairman of DiRōNA as well, and as well as my good friend in Toronto, John Arena. He was right there at the beginning. And John Arena was a great man and a great instrument of making sure that was going to be a great success overall. And just think about it, an award program where you get a chance to meet everyone over the years at different restaurants where they owned and so forth. I never would have met these people. Never would have. Just like the Chefs Association, I never would have met chefs from all over the country and all over the world. But that's what it did. And what's great about that, we're able to exchange so many ideas and discussions and meetings and seminars. And I learned a lot from it. And I know a lot of us learned from each other. And I think that it was the catalyst of that was so important, as well as the award itself. So there was an opportunity there to meet some wonderful people and some great chefs and great restaurateurs. I mean, I would stay here for an hour naming them all, because that's how many there were, and they were just great. Warren LaRuth, I do have to mention because he was one of my mentors. Warren was one of the greatest chefs I know. He was a chemist chef. He was General Max Clark's chef when he was in the military, and Warren was a creator, and he could create things. A Seven Seas dressing, Popeye's chicken. He was involved with all these different things, but he was really a down-to-earth person too, and just a wonderful, wonderful person. I admired him very, very much.
Well, I must say, DiRōNA would not exist and not be the organization it is today without the dedication that you put into it, Ted Balistoria and the late John Arena. And I know you were there. I guess it was 1990 when they put everybody together. The story was always told in New York that Tony May and Tom Margetai and the idea for it following the travel holiday. I guess it
That's
was
right.
discontinued, and that so we're so grateful for what you and Ted have done for the organization. We're grateful to be the stewards taking it forward and carrying on the great tradition. But I mean, it has a history of such incredible conferences around North America and
Right.
trips that I know that you've done right around the world as well.
Yes, John Arena was the catalyst of making that happen. He used to make those arrangements. In fact, he took me on a couple, especially we went to Sicily. He's going to my territory now. And we had a great time there. We actually went to my cousin's restaurant, and it was a free night. And everybody says, "Where are you going, Bert?" I said, "I'm going to my cousin's restaurant. Can I go?" Before you know it, all of us went. And my cousin was thrilled to have me put on a hell of a dinner. Let me tell you something. He really was a beautiful experience of us because he knew how to cook great Sicilian food. Fabulous. It was a fabulous night. Never forget it. Never forget it.
Well, Bert, we're grateful for your friendship. The Sardine Factory is exceptional. We're grateful to have it as a DiRōNA awarded restaurant and what you've done for not only your community with scholarships and having the availability for as you're saying, some students who otherwise might be in jail to provide them with a culinary education that can change their lives. What you've done for the industry and your community is exceptional. So we're grateful to you and for what you've accomplished.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I wish other people would still maintain that thinking. Get young people involved, continue the passion, because it's passion. If you got the passion, you can be successful. If you're a chef, you got to have the talent first, then the passion and the dedication. And then that you can accomplish and be a success in your life. Thank you so much.